Justin, thanks so much for doing this, man. How you doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
We're great, thanks. We were sitting here talking before we started here, and we realized that you have been part of this community for, I think, more than 10 years, 11 years plus. How did you get involved first with just CrossFit in general? And then how did that bring you to your current position?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I should be a lot more fit. I started CrossFit in 2006. And at that time, there was no CrossFit Games. And I worked for a sports technology company in Jacksonville, Florida. And I remember my roommate was friends with a girl who was dating a Navy SEAL. And he said, the way I'm training is I'm doing 2 CrossFit workouts a day. And so he was like, I want to do whatever that guy's doing. And so my roommate would come back and he was sore every day. I'm like, you're an idiot, man. What are you doing? Because I'm doing this CrossFit thing. You should check out the website. And I looked at it and I thought it would be cool. And I played college baseball and I'd been used to training a lot. And I've been kind of living on the road working after college. And so I went in, and I think the first workout was something like Helen. It had kettlebell swings, and I got real sore and said, hey, I'm in. That was the way people got brought in, was you give them a full dose, and if they stick around, you're a CrossFitter, right? So I fell in love with it. And then the company I was working for worked in professional sports. So they provided broadcast and in-person solutions for sporting events. And so I was working on the golf business and building out a line of business there. And as a result of that, I would travel to a lot of PGA Tour cities. So I'd live on the road. I'd do like over 200 days a year. And I started dropping into CrossFit gyms. And in most PGA Tour markets, there was like one CrossFit gym. So I'd go to Miami, I'd train in some guy's garage, or like Phoenix, it was somebody's garage. I went to Texas and trained with Jeff Tucker. I went to the Memorial Golf Tournament in Dublin, Ohio, and trained with Bill Henniger and Katie when they just were gym owners. And, he was starting to do some kind of real low-level dropship stuff, and he wanted to build a bigger manufacturing operation and do it in the US. And so I just got real lucky and was dropping into CrossFit gyms. And then things changed when I went to my level 1 course. And I remember sitting in the classroom and watching the command that the lecturers had of that material and how profound it was and how simple, and also the way they delivered it, like with swagger, like it stuck deep inside your brain the way they were saying it. And I remember going like, I got to quit my job. I don't know what it means, but I want to do what they do. I want to, travel around and tell people the truth and make it stick. And decided that selling scoreboards to golf tournaments wasn't the highest and best calling for me. And so on the moment, I was like, hey, I gotta get in. And I'd always kind of had a heart to be an entrepreneur. And so my family background is my parents, my dad didn't have a normal 9-to-5, worked for himself. I grew up on a horse farm in Ocala, Florida, and my mom ran the business and my dad trained horses. And so I kind of grew up an athletic mindset, and a performance mindset made sense. And then I never had a parent that was like, hey, you should put on a suit and go to work, or work your way up a ladder or something like that. So seeing the gym business, my dad trained horses. So being a trainer, I think, was probably something I just picked up my whole life without noticing it. And so I decided kind of on a whim, this was in 2008, to quit my job working in sports tech as the world was collapsing
Yeah.
and open a CrossFit gym. And I decided there was no chance that a guy like me, who was having a little success in my career, is going to join CrossFit as an executive. There's just no way. I go, if I'm going to do it, I'd had some success being an intern in other places. And so I go, let's just go learn it from the ground up. And so I took a couple commission checks where I had a little extra cash, and I signed a lease and bought, like 20 grand worth of equipment, and started CrossFit Southside in Jacksonville, Florida. And at the same time, I was kind of transitioning out of my sales job, my tech job. So I had a couple other commission checks quarterly. So I could kind of as the gym was growing and, there was some more opportunity there, I was tapering off of my previous career, but it gave me about 12 months to get my feet under me. And we launched CrossFit Southside, and, I was real proud that we built a big gym, filled it with some really, really good trainers that have gone on to become flow masters, and some athletes that went to the CrossFit Games, and a team that went one year. And, but really just a lot of really quality people they got a lot of benefit. They got the results. And by virtue of that, I also, in the gym, in really quick order, I went to the very first, there was a second CrossFit affiliate gathering in Austin, Texas. And I introduced myself to Greg very awkwardly, and also to Nicole Carroll more awkwardly. And they were both super gracious and said, hey, you got an interesting background. And Nicole offered me a spot on seminar staff. Not a spot. She didn't offer me a spot. She offered me an opportunity to come and try out for the level 1 internship program, which was kind of early. And that was like winning the lottery to me, because I'd seen it. That was what created a fork in the road for me, and said, that was my rocking chair moment. I was like, I'm not doing sports tech anymore. Like, I'm all in on CrossFit. And so when she offered me the opportunity and said, it doesn't pay anything, you got to pay your own way, actually. But if you want to come and try out, we could probably figure it out. And so I said yes. And then wasn't a real good coach, but had, a lot of good mentors and got to see a lot of good coaching. And, so I learned fast and was able to earn a spot on seminar staff. And that introduced me to Dave, and Dave and Tony at that time were, doing the CrossFit Games. And the CrossFit Games in that year, 2009, was when I joined seminar staff, was still at the ranch. So I got to go, and I was a judge at the ranch, kind of finagled my way on, hustled my way on to seminar staff, and the rest has kind of been history. And then in 2010, when they moved the games from Aromas, California to the StubHub Center in Los Angeles, I had worked in sports tech. And so I had worked in live events. And so I knew tennis courts like inside and out. Like, I'd been to a whole bunch of tennis events. And so I knew how to work a stadium. And so I got hired on and to kind of do everything else. So Dave was, creating the program and making sure the test was correct. And Tony was responsible for all the media. And that year we were also on ESPN. And so getting it started, they kind of had media and the competition side, and I was responsible for everything else. And so we had a little meeting, and they said, there's a lot of other stuff that's got to happen. We don't really need to know about it, but like, make it happen. And so, like a lot of things, that was the opportunity, and haven't looked back. And then joined the company in 2010 as the first full-time employee of the games department, because Dave was running training with Nicole at that time, and was busy because he was also still involved with his military career. And then Tony was running all media for CrossFit. So there was a lot of work, and just kind of started there.
Yeah, I almost joined that across the Southside gym when I was living in Jacksonville. Like, I was so excited when that place opened, because it's closer to where I lived. Because at the time it was just CrossFit Jacks, which was out in Atlantic Beach, I think.
Yeah, Mayport.
Too far away for me. So circumstances just didn't add up. But yeah, almost joined that one.
And it's interesting to hear this, because I feel like for so many people that have been involved with the company, they kind of had this almost serendipitous moment where a confluence of things kind of lined up. And hearing you talk about, the situation when things moved to StubHub in 2010, and how that was originally supposed to be in Aromas, and your background, like knowing a tennis stadium inside out. Did you always feel like eventually areas of your previous profession were going to weave itself into your CrossFit endeavor?
I think you're right that it was serendipitous. What was interesting is I didn't think about weaving it. Like, to me, this was a wholesale track change. I had something that was going on with my sports career, and things are going pretty good. And I just had a moment where I was like, hey, this isn't it anymore. So it wasn't like, hey, how do you weave all these things together? It was really simple for me. It was, I want to learn this from the ground up. Like, I want to be bulletproof. And I also want to add a ton of value. Like, I just want to play for a team where I feel like when I'm done, this is going to have an impact, and I'll feel proud of what we were able to do. And so for me, it wasn't like blending. It was just like an acceptance of fact. I was like, there was no, and like, those were the early days, right? Like, there was no like, hey, you have a great resume, come join the team. It was like, can you coach? And if you can coach, great. Like, we'll keep going with that. And by the way, like, how good a coach are you? And there were good coaches. There are excellent coaches. The coaches are, and then now there's hundreds of coaches that are excellent like that. But at that point, there was like, maybe I went to the very first, it was first or second, but it was the trainer summit. And it was just like, you were in awe. It was like Josh Everett was there, and Spieler, and Matt Chan, and Todd Widman, Drew Thompson, Chuck Carswell, Pat Sherwood, like all these guys that were like, I was like, man, I'm so out of my league. And it felt so good. Like it was everything I ever did in my athletic career is like, just take the last spot on the roster, like put me on the 25th seat. And I was like, and let me see if I can make the lineup. I was like, just put me in that class and let some other guy outgrade me. But like, let's do it. Tommy, you can appreciate that. Tommy's a great athlete. Most people don't know how good an athlete Tommy is.
That's the fact.
But he is an excellent at like, what are the rules? Everybody's playing by that. Let's do it. Like, let's have it. And that's the way I felt about it. So yeah. So for me, I just wanted to play. I wanted to see how much I could get out of myself. And this was a company that I felt like was doing so much good work and was transform me at a really interesting point. But I just wanted to play. I just wanted to contribute. And my sport background happened to be the thing that let me add value. And then it was, once you had a seat, it was like, just keep showing up and adding value. That's how I made seminar staff. That's how I made, made a spot for myself on the games team, was just show up and add value, and then do that tomorrow, and then do it again, and keep stacking it.
Let's fast forward to 2018, where you were throwing a curveball like the rest of us, and you watched this thing that you had spent so much time and effort building, essentially just get knocked to the ground. When that happened, what were you thinking about, not only the future of the sport, but just your future in general with the company?
So 2018 was a really rough year. And it's funny. I'm so glad we've got a film coming out that's going to release in December, where we're going to go into some of that. And it's a really cool story to tell, because it was such a remarkable year. High water mark in viewership, high water mark for attendance. You were just ready to kind of hit like exit velocity, with our media production, with where the sport was going, investment from other partners and stuff. But earlier in that year, there was a lot more going on, which was we were challenged to change the way that we were looking at the finances of the sport. And what most people don't realize is, at that point, CrossFit had largely subsidized the sport. There was a lot of years where CrossFit lost money. There was a couple of years we broke even, but you never made much. And we were getting to the point where like there was more people buying in, not just our fans, not just athletes, but also others. They were taking notice. And so right at that moment, I remember being in the car for an open announcement when we were in Houston, and we got a call, and they said, we want you guys to present a plan, to, cut it in half. And we're totally fine divesting a bunch of media. And there was, that was March, right? We would have been doing the open shows. For the rest of that year until August, it was, hey, and the option was, unless you guys can come up with a better plan. And to me, I was like, all I've done is land kind of burning airplanes. I'm like, got it. Okay, cool. Better plan. That's all I focused on. And I didn't realize it was going to be like a Dumb and Dumber, like, what was all that 1 in a million talk? But we really committed ourselves to trying to come up with a plan and doing it quickly. And because our sport revolves on an annual cycle, you can't change things really on a month-to-month basis. So really, you got to come up with a good plan that's believable. And then what would be like 2 or 3 cycles, you got to go, how do you shorten that? And there was kind of a fork in the road, which was like, hey, what can you do in 1 year versus what can you do in 2 years? And I thought if we took a 2-year plan, we could make some really, really big changes, but you could also preserve kind of the core, our storytelling capacity, a level of normalcy for the athletes, and then also stability for our partners, our media partners and our, outside patrons, big companies and stuff too. And so it was the day after the games, when normally we're getting ready to kind of, our family goes away and we turn off phones and stuff, got a call and said, hey, you need to be on call, because we're not taking the longer term plan. We're going with a quick plan. And so that meant, making some tough decisions and letting some people go that was just gut wrenching. Right. And then, for 2 years after that, trying to, retreat, but not surrender. And, kind of keep things intact, keep it cooling. And, a lot of the decisions we made weren't necessarily wrong. I think they were made really fast. Some of the goals of those to be more globally inclusive, to have other countries really kind of take part in the competition. Those aren't wrong. Those are goals that we still have today. Yeah. But it was really abrupt. And I think that, if we've learned anything through COVID and all the other stuff is, when there's uncertainty, it really prevents people from going fast and going far. So that created a lot of that. And it was tough, for a couple of years, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. And during that process, you mentioned how there's still some goals from that exist today. From that process, what were some of the things that you were able to distill from moving fast and maybe, making these changes that would take otherwise multiple years on end that you've been proud to carry over into this new era since things have changed in the last calendar year or so?
Yeah, there's been a lot, right? So, and again, really at the end of the day, CrossFit's in this like super cool position. We're the world's leading educator of fitness professionals. We've got the largest network of training locations in the whole world. And, one of the ways that we gather our global community is through sport. And for some people, they want to, play for gold medals. For other people, they just want to challenge themselves and have a training goal. But I think the things that we took away from it was how can we make it more inclusive in the sense of we want more geographic participation. And, at that point, when you've only got a certain number of seats and you're playing a global sport, you're going to get a little bit of a, overweighted population. You're going to get a lot of Icelandics. You're going to get a lot of North Americans. And there's some really good athletes that are just below the cut that, if they had the opportunity, they're going to go back and maybe light their country on fire. Like what Guy's doing right now in Brazil. Like he's showing people that a Brazilian can step on stage and look right at the camera and look right at the barbell and look right at the gold medal winners and say, I think I'd like to have that. And he's going to come for it. And he did this in Iceland and it lit Europe up. I thought Willie did this for, France as well, like gave people, a champion that they can cheer for. And then also you see what all the secondary effects are. Like Katrin learns it from Annie, you've got Australians and they're passing it along to others as well. So there's one thing to think you can play at that stage. It's another to know you can play at that stage. And the games become sort of the standard. And once people make the standard, they're like, okay, now I don't just want to make it. I want to keep going. And then that unlocks a whole other sort of generation of athletes, and it motivates and inspires others, to maybe not get a gold medal, but, to want to participate and see how good they can be. Kind of scratch your Willy Wonka ticket and be like, I love Carasandra's story. It's like, somebody walks in, you're like, hey, I have no idea if I'm going to be good at this. And you're like, whoa, you're like a superhuman. Like all you needed, like, holy cow. So one of the ones is kind of geographic inclusion. Another one I think is, how do we play together with others better? And so, some of the decisions early on were for CrossFit to not do any media and then hand that over to others. And there's, consequences to that. I think it created a more scattered voice, but it also created opportunities for others to step up and present a different perspective on what CrossFit means to them, what the sport means, their interpretation of it. And so I think that's been a net positive, ultimately. I think it's been tougher for fans, having to go to a couple more places. And again, like handle it abruptly. But I think ultimately the richness of our community is how many different voices participate. Our common unity is that we all do CrossFit.
Yeah.
We show up, we do hard things, we keep score, and we're planning for a better outcome in the future. And it creates durable, resilient people. And so the more that we can tell those stories more broadly, I think that's a good thing. I would like to see more of a central storytelling theme. Because I think sometimes, everybody kind of scattered. And I think really what's brought our community together is telling the best stories, highlighting the best athletes, the best characteristics, the virtues of CrossFit training, CrossFit coaches, and our community. And so I think we will get back into the saddle with trying to lead from the front on that, which is, be influential voices in the storytelling, but not the only voice. And I think that's one of the good outcomes that can come from this, and that'll continue to, play out down the road.
When Eric Rosa took over last year and made it very clear that he wanted to get the games back to where they were before everything happened, there was this perception that it was like, oh, they're just going to hit the reset button and we're going to go back to the old way of, open regionals games. Everyone will be happy. But you and everyone else decided that was not going to be the path that you walked. And I think you gave some insight in your last answer as to why that was the case. But why did you not decide to let's just hit the reset button and then business as usual?
Well, I think the paradigm of our sport, or like any real kind of project, it can be easy to think of it as like a mechanical problem. You're like, okay, so that car has just been sitting there. Why don't you just fuel it up, hit the ignition, and start driving again? And it's not, it behaves more like a living organism, which is, things change and it's at a different state. We've always, I think, been successful kind of playing the hand we've been dealt, and trying to play it as well as possible. And that's a characteristic of our team and some of the best members of the CrossFit community is, how do you play this well? It's like you learned it in the gym. It's like, I didn't want to do this. I learned it from a really influential firefighter that I know, Johnny Mack. You guys know him too.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about his job, he's a battalion chief in the fire service. And when he shows up, he didn't cause the fire. He didn't choose the fire, but he is responsible for that fire. And what do I need to do to make this the best outcome that it could possibly be? And I don't think that everything's like managing fires, but it also comes to like, hey, what are the opportunities? How do we play this well based on where we are, based on what our resourcing levels are, based on what the community is telling us, what athletes are capable of, what partners are willing to invest in. And so to say like, hey, turn it on again, I don't want to go back to 2018. I want to take the position that we had and go, hey, what can we do now that we could never do before? And I think Eric challenged us with this when he took the reign. Was I never heard Eric say, let's go back to where we were. Mm-hmm. I heard him repeatedly say, especially during COVID, as a cold-blooded entrepreneur, like that guy he's the real deal. What can we do now that we could never do before? What are the opportunities that we can lean into? And when we produced the CrossFit Games in 2020, the message was, hey, we can go small. We've been big. We can go small with 5 and 5. But come rain or snow or COVID or whatever, you're going to get a CrossFit Games champion. That's what you can count on from us. We're going to do it. We're going to say, and we're going to tell it. And then now going forward, we're not totally clear of all those things. But what can we do to involve other stakeholders from our community? So how do we make the games really, benefit gyms? How do we make it really benefit our training methodology so that more people see it? How do we introduce CrossFit to new audiences effectively? And, like what we do on television, it does show it to more people. But also, how do we involve partners so that they can amplify our message? How do we involve outside media so that they can cover angles that might otherwise be lost? Or how do they go deeper in creating opportunities for athletes? How do we create better earning opportunities for those guys? So I think when we were 100% responsible for all those things, you tried to do it as well as possible. And then through the really lean times, we had to partner and collaborate more. And now I think combining the best of both of those, being well-resourced, but also being, truly interested in, what we can do to drive benefits for others. I think that presents a really, interesting and more opportunistic kind of outcome. Like, I think that's going to be fun for us to play for a while.
Yeah. And now we start to, the transition happens, 2020 games happen. The turnaround for the 2021 season is very, very short. Even from the time that the company, the ink was dry on the sale of the company. And I'm curious what the ideation process looked for you guys in this kind of non-traditional turnaround, especially having to switch again. And as someone who's going through wedding planning, one thing that stood out for us is having a non-negotiable. And I'm curious, what were some of the non-negotiables for you guys in creating this new format?
What were some of the non-negotiables? I think one of the things that Dave really leaned into early was, let's keep it really simple. And that was one of the biggest criticisms of what the 2020 season did was, and it was one of the things that just drove me nuts also, was how dynamic it was and how spread out it was. And, it was kind of like you had this hot fire and then you kind of spread coals all over the place and then tried to convince everybody that it was like the world's greatest fire. And you're like, it's not, it's cooler because they're all spread out. But I think the big one for him and for us and our team was, let's get back to some of the things that we know work. And that's a linear season, that starts with the Open and then it moves on. So it's a playoff system, so you start with hundreds of thousands and then you play it down to in-person events and then you play it into the finals. And that is easy for everybody to understand. And as you guys know, our sport is fundamentally difficult to convey to fans. But also, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because it also has a richness that most people are like, hey, if you want to be a fan of a sport, this is like the Sauvignon, this is like that killer cab. It's complex and there's a lot of things going on, but like you can really kind of sink your teeth into it. It's not just like, play up by ones, twos, and threes, and I wonder who's going to hit the dramatic shot.
Yep.
But it was keep it really simple and linear. And then once we have that out, then we start taking forward steps also. And so what are some of the things that have worked well in the past that we can turn back on? And then also, what are some of the untapped opportunities, and how do we involve more people in the sport? And so I don't want to tip our hand soon, but by the end of the year, there's going to be a lot of new sharing with the community about directionally where we're going. And the good news is that it's going to create more opportunities. The games is going to be easy for people to understand. It's going to be predictable. It's going to have a lot of certainty for athletes, so they know when the marks are, so they can commit to training. They can also commit to an off season if that's what they choose to do. But also for others, there's going to be more ways to play also in a way that ties it together. And then mostly just try not to change things on the fly a whole lot, which I say that's the goal, is to provide a more concrete track. And we know that 2021, that was the goal, but like it wasn't a reality, right? Yeah. So we're planning all of 2021 under the auspice of like, hey, will we be able to host in-person events? And this is one of the non-negotiables, I guess, is you could say that in-person events would always be the target and it would be the priority. And so there were many opportunities to say, why don't you just call it now and just go virtual for all of this? And the reason we didn't is because it's a worse experience for the athletes. Mm-hmm. To have to go online, you don't get to test it as thoroughly. They don't get to look left and right. You don't get the same race. It also doesn't honor them. It's a necessity if you can't get to an in-person event, but it's better in person. And by the way, it was also one of those non-negotiables we have I don't know if it's a duty or an obligation, but we feel like it's a part of our contribution back to the community that we create gatherings. And this is an opportunity for local affiliates and their athletes and their coaches and members to get there and cheer. And like, we didn't have a damn thing to cheer about in May and June of last year. And when you showed up at a CrossFit competition and people were cheering and they were happy, and it felt like old times, you're like, okay, this is part of what it takes to get the flywheel moving again. And it's not spinning real fast, but you needed to have that in order to have a CrossFit Games finals. And man, it sucked to not have many internationals there. Usually about a quarter of that audience is from outside the United States, which blows me away. And we had 2% of our audience was from outside the United States. And they're probably all from Canada. But so, that was, again, you had to run a handful of in-person semifinals, and there was many opportunities to say, why don't you just go virtual? It's less expensive, it's easier, you could commit to it up front. And we held the line as long as possible. And we were able to run 5 in-person events. We could stream from 4 of them. And for half the athletes, they got to have an in-person experience. And that was better. And we created an opportunity where all athletes could get into the United States if they qualified. Like that was another big one. Like we were never going to run the games virtually, even if it had to, if for some reason we couldn't get athletes in from certain countries, we were going to run an in-person finals for a community here, for an audience here, and for the athletes that could make it. So I'd say those were probably the 2 non-negotiables, is regardless of what the world was doing, we were going to stay committed to running in-person events, even if it meant we were some of the first ones. And I'm proud that we did that.
This was the first year that you had No Bull as the title sponsor, and they were a company that was born from the CrossFit community. What was it like having them on board for this first year?
It was great. And we've been fortunate that, a lot of companies over time have really embraced the CrossFit community. And so Noble coming in was the same, and in a lot of ways they wanted to continue to show the world that this is a super growing sport, that they were all in, and they didn't want to just show up and like make the team. They really wanted to take it in a new direction. And by the way, new direction, they wanted to continue to grow this and add in a way that only they could, that they felt. And so some of that was kind of brand uniformity. They really want, they're an excellent brand. They do a great job. They've got a beautiful aesthetic. They care a lot about that. So they wanted to come in and say, hey, we want to bring that to the party and, add that. So we want to dress this really well. We want to really honor the athletes that are there at the finals because it's such a remarkable thing. And they put so much effort into the pursuit of being a games athlete or being the fittest person on earth. Like it's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really cool to have a fresh perspective on that. Not that any of the other perspectives were wrong, but it was just a new perspective. And so they brought some new ideas to it. And all the way, they want to see prize money go up. They want to, increase the credibility of the sport. They want to grow with CrossFit long term. Also in our kind of, they want to support trainers. They want to support affiliates. So they're not as big as where our previous partners have been. But they're also growing. And I think it's fun to work with companies that are, their stars are, kind of shooting up. And so it's just really fun. I think they've got a great attitude. Their leadership is terrific. Their marketing team's awesome. They activate real well. I think the athletes feel it. So yeah, anyway, it's been terrific.
Yeah. That was apparent from the entrance experience at the games with the lockers and everything like that. And seeing the response from athletes was really pretty cool. But on the topic of sponsors and partners, you mentioned like the exit velocity from a couple of years ago, and especially coming back to this year, I still think the sport, and correct me if I'm wrong, is at that point, and it's kind of a gray area where you're starting to grow and non-endemic brands are starting to look at the sport and take interest and want to be a part of that. And with that, we saw some at the games this year. So how do you walk that line between bringing in these brands to bring more money into the sport and making sure you're not kind of betraying the ethos of the sport and CrossFit overall as a whole?
Yeah, it's a fine line, and it's something that gets a lot of conversation internally and externally. The first is I think you got to look at the sport as different than our education group and different than our gym group. And so there's different stakeholders in each of those, so the key stakeholders in the gym it's the affiliates themselves, and it's their members, and it's the trainers at those gyms. And for the education department, it's, telling truth for a living, staying true to our methodology, sharing that with others, making it accessible. And for the sport, we have athletes as stakeholders. We have event organizers as stakeholders. We have sponsors, corporate partners, and we have media partners. And so trying to create opportunities that are rich and fruitful for each of those. So I think there's been really healthy interest, and there has been for a long time, but we've been reticent to go down that road. We kind of like self-funding things. And so we said no to some opportunities that were presented. And so now I don't think the idea is, hey, how do you lessen your standards and just say yes more often? But how do we really go out and say, who are the brands that we think would be awesome for athletes, awesome for our event organizers, awesome for our, gyms that would provide value to members, give them things or recognize them in a way that other brands wouldn't. And that'll be fun for the next couple of years to kind of pursue that. At the same time, we want to increase prize money at the finals, and we would like to make sure that event organizers see this as a sustainable ecosystem. And that ends up resulting in higher prize money too. Like it's hard to pay out prize money if an event's not making money. And so, ticket sales, sponsorships, and maybe a little merchandising are kind of their primary revenue streams, and, virtual competitions. So I think you want to say yes more often, but also at the same time, we want to be really highly selective and partner with brands that are going to acknowledge, bring value to other aspects of the community as well. And then the last one is, finding brands that are going to amplify CrossFit's core message. At the end of the day, we're a company on mission to transform 100 million lives through CrossFit. And the way we need to do that, like letting other people amplify what we're already doing, is a good way to do that. And so, tapping into that where it's appropriate, would be a good idea.
Yeah. Do you feel like the sport is at a place, and do you think there's value in bringing in those non-endemic brands and helping them adopt, or I guess maybe entertain CrossFit's ethos in a way, kind of not necessarily making them bend to your will? That sounds a little aggressive, but I think like maybe educating and changing other brands' perspective on the situation as well to kind of enrich the other direction.
Absolutely. And if I didn't highlight that when I spoke previously, bad on me. But I think that's the idea. When you go out and we're talking to brands that aren't fluent on thrusters and metcons and, our definition of intensity and stuff like that, the first thing we lead with is, we're a company on mission. Our job is to transform lives. We've got affiliates to get that done. We've got an education program that teaches people how to get that job done. And then we gather and engage them through sport. And we boldly tell our story through media. So like, that's the story that we start off with. And the idea is, how do we really get out there? And it just takes time, honestly, as you guys, we didn't have a big outbound effort. Mostly the sport funding was kind of like, hey, who called in? Yeah, like, hey, we got an opportunity. Would you guys be interested in this? And sometimes it was yes, sometimes it was no, but there wasn't really like this selection process, which is like, hey, let's go line up the brands that have values that are in line with what we do, the ones that could really add value to our whole ecosystem, and also the ones that are, financially capable of doing that. And then let's pick some of those and go get them. And when I say go get them, the idea is let's go start those conversations and see if there's a fruitful relationship for both parties there, where they can, speak to a CrossFit community and where they can also share CrossFit's message to new audiences. Because I think ultimately that results in more people getting a coach, joining a group, and that's going to make a sticky behavior that's going to make their life better. So that's anybody that can help with that, we're on board with it.
We hear a lot from people, CrossFit needs to be more of a professional sport. And then you ask them what that means and you get, 30 different answers from 30 different people. What does that mean to you?
I don't know. Like, that's not a definition that I hold ourselves accountable for. Again, it's like, there are successful sports that aren't, I don't want to say professional. I think I'd reframe the question is, how can we use sport to transform lives? How can we use sport to the highest and best use of its potential? And do that with our gym and our education, on our, sport group, and also all the other things that we're doing in the community. I think professional means, there's one way to define it. It was like, professional means you get paid. And I think that's too narrow. Because I think a lot of people participate in sport because they want to have an experience, and because it steers their training. And I'm a big believer in the live event experience. You take something that you do every day in a gym, or if you're a musician, something you do in your garage or in a studio. And then when you go live, it's just different. It's extraordinary. And you're doing it with others. It's a performance. And so I want to create more of those opportunities for people, both on the participation level, as a spectator level, as a media level. So I think when we're talking about professionalizing the sport, I think what it means is, just continuing to do the best aspects of what we do. But I'm not locked into this as like, hey, if like pro is like the goal, like, and if you didn't maximize for pro, that it's not the right thing. Because it might be maximized for participation. It might be maximized for, like intramural sport, or connecting gyms with each other, having local championships. Back in the day, amateur sport was considered the highest expression of athleticism. Amateur golfers were the gold standard. The pros were the ones that were kind of like dirty because they were just playing for money. But amateur tennis players, amateur golfers, and these are lifestyle sports. I think there's a lot that CrossFit can learn from that. The best surfer might not be the guy that wins the most points or earns the most money. It might be the best big wave surfer. Like, maybe that's the one that, like, is he pro? I don't know. So I think playing the pro side, playing the amateur side, I think both of those are really important. And ultimately, it's how do you use the sport as an instrument to transform people's lives? And for some people, they'll be motivated. Many people will not be. Great, train. Don't play the sport. And for some people, training, like, I like racing with people. I raced with Emily Frid in our class today. She usually beats me, but like, I like having somebody to chase, you know, so like, that's a little bit of competitive, it keeps the intensity up. And for me, that keeps it fun.
Yeah. That's an interesting notion, because it immediately draws the comparison, whether it's NCAA football or basketball compared to the pros. So a lot of people that prefer the college game, obviously that's changing with NIL, but because the high likelihood is that a vast majority of these athletes aren't going to go pro. So in essence, they're playing it at the highest level to where money isn't necessarily guaranteed. And so they see that as a truer expression of the sport rather than just, pumping up money, which is interesting. And hearing you say that involving both, do you feel like that's a unique element of the sport of CrossFit now? Is you're almost in charge of the NCAA and the NFL at the same time?
I don't know. I come from a golf background. And so, like in golf, there's this sort of triumvirate in the United States. So there's the United States Golf Association, and their job is to promote the game of golf, especially to get more people playing the game. And then there's the PGA of America, and their primary job is that they are the ones that train instructors to go teach other people to play the sport. And then there's the PGA Tour, which most people relate to, and they are a professional touring organization that is, driving, sponsorship and television ratings and things like that. So all three of them operate a little bit differently, but one wants to get more people to play, one wants to train the trainers, and one of them wants to, enthusiastically support professional opportunities for the best. But I've seen others where I think it can operate, effectively under a single one. There's golf's a kind of a messy story, but like there was a time when golf could do both of those things. And so I don't know, like, I think, I don't think it's wrong doing it, because I think we've got, the way I think this works best is when all of it works together. So golf's not on a mission to transform lives. That's not their purpose, right? Like they're just like, if you want to go, if you're a touring guy, or if you're a trainer, or if you're an amateur, like there's a different group that will cater to you. In ours, like all three lines of business all support the same mission, and we do it differently, but it's complementary. And that's again where I'm saying, like, I want to play our hand best.
Yeah.
I don't want to take what the World Surfing League does, or what the tennis, USTA, the ATP and WTA and some of their things. I don't want to take that stuff off the shelf and apply it to us. And that's been one of the frustrations that I've seen, was like, why don't you guys just do that? They're pro, so you should go copy them. And I'm like, tell me the group of people who's on mission to transform 100 million lives, and like maybe I would copy them. We're trying to do something different. We're trying to play the hand that we've been dealt in our natural advantage as well. And what that means is, I think in some cases people are frustrated that we're not maximizing for one of those things. Like, how come you're not maximizing for earning potential for athletes? Well, if you're an athlete, you probably want us to maximize for that. But, if you take a patient perspective, there's a lot of beneficiaries in our system, and you want to create something that does increase opportunities for them, but not at the expense of like turning people off, or, leaving affiliates behind, or making it seem unapproachable, or make it seem like they're superheroes. It's one of the proudest things that I have in our media, is that you can draw a line from the fittest person on earth all the way down to somebody who's walking into the doors of a gym. And that's like a relatable story that every one of us knows. Justin Medeiros trains with Adam. Adam has a gym. Their gym helps people of all different ability levels. And so you're like, that's the fittest man on earth, who has a coach who's part of a community, and that community is doing some other things. They're not just like a pro sport factory.
Yeah.
That's one of the results of training at a CrossFit gym, is if you've got enormous potential, you might be the fittest man on earth and win a gold medal. If you're somebody that doesn't have that natural ability level, guess what? You're going to be the fittest, which means healthiest over time. You're going to be the fittest and healthiest version of yourself if you stay with your version of CrossFit training. And nobody else has that, so anyway, and again, like, we're not closed off on it.
Yeah.
I haven't thought this all the way through, but like, if somebody else said, hey, those guys do a really good job, we're sitting down, we're in Colorado, and there's some folks up in Colorado Springs that we're going to talk to, but there's a lot of other places that we draw kind of best practices from. Golf is one, tennis is one, surfing is one. We're going to talk to the folks with triathlon. We've talked to weightlifting. And so there's things that we can do that we can lift from other places that will help. But also, you can't forget that CrossFit is the world's leading when it comes to fitness education. So like, I also looked into Nicole and her group and I looked to our affiliates as like where the best practices that are going to drive what we're doing forward. So anyway, I think and by the way, I think it suits us and it suits the CrossFit community well, is we're not a carbon copy of somebody else. And it'd be nice if people stopped asking us to do that.
The last question I'll ask about this, but you mentioned some of those organizations like the World Surfing League and the PGA Tour. One thing that they do all have in common is that, they have probably media relations people. They have a website you can go to that has comprehensive information that's up to date about, their athletes and stuff like that. I know you're just getting this thing back, flying again, but do you have plans of adding any of those tools so that, fans and media can stay better up to date what's going on with the sport?
Yeah, we do. But we also, you've got to look at kind of where we are. So the PGA Tour runs, I think, 42 different golf tournaments just in North America. And then there's a European tour, and there's an Australasian tour, and there's a Canadian, like, so, there's literally more well-funded, sustainable events in those ecosystems, and those end up trickling into better support vehicles. I think we've got to build that ourselves. And that's where CrossFit is investing in those things. But also the investment is kind of relative to where we are as a sport. We're not nearly as large as professional touring golf. We're not as large as professional touring surfing, and some of those things. Can we be that big? Yeah. Can we be bigger? Possibly. Is big the goal? No. Transforming lives is the goal. Like, how big do you need to be to maximize the amount of people whose lives you can change? But I will say that, making it easier to be a good fan, very, very important to our team. And remember, our sport's hard, where it's like, hey, this literally, the events change. Sometimes they're not even announced until minutes or hours before. So I think there's always going to be more difficulty being a fan and kind of getting coached up on it. But we also have a beautiful product. The athletes are remarkable. It's interesting. They're wonderful characters. They have excellent character. So it makes it really easy. But I think the stats side is one angle. What I'm also maybe more interested in is telling the story of those athletes, telling the story of how they are dependent on and they flourish with great coaches and in great communities. And so how do we go highlight some of those things? Because I don't think you need to be the best statistical fan of our sport to grasp it and to really feel bought in. You might have just an athlete whose story you relate to, and you want to hear them answer some of the tough questions about how they handle things that are similar to what you're handling. And so we want to use our media spotlight to do that more. So yes, grow the stats so that you quantify things a little better, but also to really drive up the amount of production we have on great character pieces that are relatable, that impact a lot more people than just the stats gurus and stuff.
And speaking of production, CBS was back on board in 2020, also in 2021. What does that partnership look like moving forward, and how are things with that progressing?
They're good. CBS has been a big believer in what CrossFit does for a long time. Before they worked with us, actually, when we were with ESPN, there was Champions for CrossFit at CBS. And they like it for the right reasons. Which is, hey, they think that there's a big thing there. They like what we're doing. It's not just like an attractive 2-hour program. They get that this is from thousands of affiliates in North America. They've created good opportunities for us in the past. We've got to go out and earn that back. But also CBS is one, I think there's a lot of international broadcasters that fall in that same bucket. What can we do to serve CrossFit on television outside the United States for benefit of international affiliates? And not just get the highlights on, but how do you also get, again, where do these athletes come from? What does it mean to have a coach? Talk about the methodology, use language correctly. Those are going to be really important for us going forward too, not just domestically, but increasingly, how do you serve that to new audiences outside the US?
Drug testing and drug positive results are always a topic of conversation. They always have been, and they probably always will be. But where do you think, as a sport, CrossFit needs to improve in their testing system?
Where do we need to improve?
Or how can you improve?
What's really interesting is I'm trying not to make this clickbait. So testing is testing. Mm-hmm. People pass tests and people fail tests. The reason we have testing is to validate the claims of our athletes. And this is, I'm convinced, a subject that you can't win in terms, like, you don't win testing. Would winning be that you found a cheater down leaderboard that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten? I don't know what winning looks like on this. What we do is we run a test. So the CrossFit Games are a test that's reserved for the fittest athletes on earth, and many stages to get there. And it's a privilege for the athletes to get there and to be tested in that way. What we do to honor those athletes is that we validate their performance in a second way, which is that they are tested for performance enhancing drugs. And it's a strict standard. And the reason I say I don't know how you win this is, when more athletes test positive, is that a good or a bad thing? Did you catch everyone? Is it bad because more people are using performance enhancing drugs? I think the way I determine winning is I want as few accidental positives as possible. I don't want any athletes in the future coming back and saying like, I had no idea this was in this supplement. I trusted my local vitamin mixer to produce this thing. And it breaks my heart. It's the hardest thing in the world to tell somebody who is qualified to go to the CrossFit Games that you're not allowed to compete. It's gut wrenching, whether it's COVID or whether it's a positive drug test, to call somebody and go, you might be in the United States and you're planning to show up, but you can't because objectively you have a performance enhancing drug in your system. And we have a policy of strict liability, and we'll sort it out later, whether you knew or you didn't know. You made a mistake. And I'm sorry, but like, it's hard to draw that line.
Yeah.
And in every instance, I don't think people realize that there's CrossFitters on both sides of those communications. There's a CrossFitter that gets told no, and there's a CrossFitter that says, it's my job to tell you that I can't let you. It's never you're a bad person or you screwed up or I'm judging you. It's I'm not allowed to let you because the other athletes haven't, and we got a policy there. So I think winning for us would look like no one else comes to us and says, oh, I had no idea. And I brought it back and I had it tested. You're like, you know what? Had methylhexanamine in it. It had GW 1516 in it. You're like, I had no idea. I trusted that person, or I didn't ask, or I want as little of that as possible.
Yeah.
And I still think we get way too much accidental. And it goes back to the notion of being a professional sport. Athletes have a responsibility in that also. Professional sport is not a duty that's reserved for CrossFit LLC. It's also for the judges. It's for the athletes themselves. It's for the coaches of those athletes to hold, a really high standard for ourselves, because you don't want to see that. And it means asking tough questions. It might mean paying a little more for a supplement. It might mean, saying no to something that makes a really cool claim. It might mean asking your boyfriend or your fiance, what's happening with that unmarked bottle. Like, I get it. But that's what professional looks like day in and day out. And for people that have played high level collegiate sports or professional sports, like, you get it, the rest of the world doesn't have the angst that CrossFit has, which is like, they're a good person, you should go easier on them. Like, nah, man, being professional is a responsibility for all parties on that. And so I really hope that athletes take that and run with it. There's only so much we can do to educate. You can't ask CrossFit to say, hey, test less or be more lenient. That's like program the workouts a little easier, or that's not our ethos. It is a strict policy and it is what it is. And so winning would mean fewer athletes that had accidental positives. I'd love to see that.
What about testing more?
So testing more, I think, is important. I think testing, but there's a sense of is more, how everybody has a different opinion of what more looks like.
Yeah.
We talk to other organizations and they go, you guys test that much? So it's funny, in our community, they're like, you guys don't test as much as Major League Baseball. I'm like, yep, I don't have Major League Baseball's television deal. I also don't have Major League Baseball's, 32 stadiums or whatever. So, everything, it's kind of relative to the athlete pool. And it's a hard thing. So do you test the 40 men and women? Do you test the 400,000 that are participating in the Open? So everybody kind of has a different line on that. So I don't want to say you can't win that. More testing is good. I think more education is good also. But I also think that there's this false notion that more is always better. And it's how deep down a leaderboard do you need to go? And I don't know what the answer is to that. We have a line.
Yeah.
And it's, the people that are impacting the advancement of athletes and the people that are advancing the claim of fittest man and woman on earth. Now, does that mean that there might be people who are messing around down leaderboard? Possibly, probably. Do I think that's all athletes? No, I don't. And when people make that claim, it's I remember the first time I saw a guy, I trained with a guy that threw 97 miles an hour. And most people are like, you can't do that, and Tommy, you've played sports. Sean, you've played and you've, commentated on a lot of different sports. The people that win the rock climbing championships and the people that are NFL offensive linemen and the people that are NBA centers and the people that are jockeys, they're all human beings. And look at the variance in those bodies. Some are faster, some are slower, some are heavier, some are stronger, some are lighter, some are quick. Like there's so much variance in this. And when people say like, that's not possible, it pisses me off because I'm like, hey, maybe that's just the best training program applied to the most gifted athlete for this particular thing. And it's being expressed on the competition floor. And you don't get it because you don't know what it feels like to train like Noah Olson or Matt Fraser or Catherine Davis-Daughter or Tia Claire Toomey. Like you don't see what that's like. You don't train with that pain, which is intensity, like the way they do. So like, I get it. If you're like, hey, I go to the gym and I can't do that. And I see somebody else, but that would be like me going like, I can't run as fast as Usain Bolt, cheater. Instead of marveling at the fact that I'm like, that guy, like I'm about his height. How tall is Usain Bolt?
6'5", 6'4". Yeah. 6'5".
Yeah. I'm like, it's incredible. I'm in awe of what he's able to do. I'm 6'5". Like, and so that would be like me calling him a cheater instead of saying like, hey, you're gifted, you've got excellent training, and you're maximizing your potential. And I think that most people just don't know what the real ceiling is. And that's why I think the CrossFit Games is such an incredible part of our world, is that like you're setting a new standard for human performance and you're measuring it. And it's an open invitation for $20. Anybody in the world can try it out.
Yeah.
But when people say like, hey, that guy's cheating, look at how they look. I'm like, yeah, look again, a jockey, Shaquille O'Neal, look at how they look, like that's not, the standard.
Yeah. I was gonna say, to be fair, Justin, if I saw you running like Usain Bolt, I'd probably raise an eyebrow, to be fair. But I think the subject of more testing and more being better tends to gain traction, I think, when increase in testing is correlated with more positive results. And there was a sequence of years where, as the sport grew, we saw more results. But it also taps into, I think, a lot of the I guess the digital discourse and public discourse of, well, it's human nature. As the sport grows and there's money involved, people are going to maybe push the limits. And there's also, I think, the element, and I'd be curious to hear your opinion on this. Like, some people see sometimes CrossFit highlighting its athletes as projecting like a level of virtue above what most people assume for professional sports, which is weird to say, but like to be fair, like Dave posted about it, covering the subject of Vicky Caruso a couple of weeks ago on Instagram. So naturally people latch on to that. And so I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily a question or anything more than it is a comment, but it just seems like there's so many different things, like you said, and we're still learning so much that it does feel like this isn't necessarily a situation that you can win, but in the very least, like dedicating more resources generally seems like something that could benefit the sport if it continues to grow and embolden the claim of fittest on earth.
I think it's a level of effort thing. I think policing in general, whether it's in any aspect, you never win. You're never like, oh, great, no more bad guys. Solved it. And you know how we solved it? We policed ourselves into a solution. Like, it takes a community to hold itself accountable, because you've never got enough tests to get all the bad guys. You never got enough cops to get all the bad guys. Like, it takes a community and it takes a society to say, like, that's not okay here. And I think that's actually one of the things that CrossFit has working for us. We do a remarkably good job in taking anonymous tips, acting on them, and finding people that are cheating. And I think that's part of the ethos of our community, is like, earn what you get. It is what it is, like, do your work and see what the number is. And if it's awesome. And if somebody's cheating or somebody's taking a shortcut or they're not doing it the right way, it bothers other people too. So I think that's one of the unseen things in our testing program, is that it's a lot of these athletes, these aren't just like, hey, they were a random test. We do have a significant directed testing program that goes after problems. And so I don't like it when people say things like, hey, CrossFit's trying to run away from this problem, or you have a motivation to, you're hiding this. People will post something like, I know for a fact that some athlete got tested and he was positive, and then CrossFit hid the results because it would be bad for their brand image. Wrong. Like, who do we shy away from? What would be wrong is if you were caught covering up something that you knew was untrue. And not just wrong for the sport, but like, we work for a company who tells the truth about exercise and nutrition. in a world that has a really hard time dialing that in.
Mhm.
And I was like, so I like that, I don't like this. I don't like it when people go, hey, you have an incentive to keep it looking like it's a clean sport. I'm like, no, we don't. Like we have, like, it is what it is. Again, it's the test. Like if people test positive, I'm sorry, and by the way, it's gut wrenching. But also like, I'm not embarrassed by that.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back. The reason we do it is to validate the claims of the athletes that are doing the right things. This is legit. You know what they're doing? They're training CrossFit, more volume at an intensity most people can't fathom once. And they're doing that multiple times a day for years and months of their lives. This is what the result is of that program. So anyway, when I'm getting all spun up now. Those are the things that bother me about it. But yeah, I think a lot of things that people don't see is that we're not running away from the problem. We're running right at it. And so when we hear things, and this is the part that our community can participate in, support at CrossFitGames.com, drug testing at CrossFitGames.com. Like that line gets read by CrossFitters and enabled into our testing program. So, we all kind of have a role to play, and then the athletes themselves have a role to play in terms of like, just stop, work really hard to prevent accidentals. Because then that, it does obfuscate things where people are like, oh, a lot more positives. I just want to see that in the future, you go every positive, like, yep, that person was trying to do something, and right now I do think that we do get a lot of accidentals because people are surprised that they performed well, or they didn't know that there was an accountability that they should have known about. So
last question, because I know you gotta go, and we appreciate you taking the time. But where are we in the process of finding possibly a new host city for the games right now?
We're in the process. We've been real pleased with Madison. They're a terrific host city for us and for our community, not just for the people to organize the games, but I think they make it really fun for people to come into town. Good restaurants, a lot of things to do. It's beautiful. So we're exploring other opportunities. Madison is one of those that we're exploring for a continuation, whether it's a short or a long continuation to be decided. But we're looking at a bunch of other cities as well. And the next up for us is we need to travel a little, get out and actually put boots on the ground on other cities and see if it has the right kind of feel, not just from a spectator experience, but does it have all the raw material necessary for the test, and so, we're being patient with that. So,
Yeah. I was going to say, is there a timeline when people might be able to know where the prospective cities are? Because I think that's one of the things people like.
Why, you guys want to vote?
Well, I think people just want to know.
Yeah.
I think people,
this is the thing that I guess it surprised me that as much traction as this has gotten, I think we're far away from making a decision. So I don't think it's like, hey, next week or in a month, we're going to tell you guys like, this is where it is. There's a long kind of due diligence process to make this work. There are so many different factors for our sport that goes into it. And we have these big kind of lofty goals for creating an excellent community experience when we're on site. So, so I'd say, this is not something I'd be holding my breath about if I was a fan. I was like, plan for Madison. We're going to be back there next year. We'll have information, when we feel really good about wherever our next city is going to be. I
think people just want to know what the list of cities are, because I think people like envisioning what that might be like. And I've seen a lot of discussion around like, oh, I think this would be a good city, or these are the unique elements of this community that would bring to it. Because I think Madison really opened up a whole host of possibilities for people that maybe never saw Madison as a potentially good city. I think more important than anything, people just want to know what the cities are.
Yeah. I think when we get close to the process, I'm not sure we would say, hey, here's the list of runners. But I would say, we don't make this decision in a vacuum. Like there are other people that play into it, and not least of which, like the local affiliates and, thinking about, the fans that come to it. Those are, it's not, we're not running it in some dump. We're trying to find a place where it's a lot of fun, where again, like I said, I'm a big believer in live events where the ordinary experience of doing CrossFit becomes extraordinary, where the community experience, you can marvel at athletes, you find some new friends, and you go back home fired up to train. That's what we're trying to create at the CrossFit Games. And it takes time to find the perfect city for that.
Cool. Well, Justin, we'll let you go. I know you're jam-packed. And again, we appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know we're really excited about what's coming up next season, and hopefully we can get you on here again soon to talk about 2022 and all the good things coming up.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Good to talk to you.